So the interesting thing about Tristan and his father is that the father at some point, Ludlow, says about his son, his middle son, that he recognized in his son his own father, the grandfather, and that he makes a point about, you know, these sort of personalities sort of skipping a generation. And the grandfather is also this adventurer and sort of world traveler who still lives in Cornwall and you know, travels the open seas. And there are stories of him, you know, going all over the world in the South Pacific and taking Ludlow to see like whales somewhere. I can't remember all the details. But what we come to see is that Tristan, you know, he doesn't belong to his father. He doesn't really belong to anyone. He's kind of he's this kind of unusual person, and he's even described in sort of supernatural terms at various points in the novel, that he kind of belongs to God, that he lives outside of time and outside of these more sort of terrestrial relationships amongst brothers. And, you know, I don't want to, it's like, I guess we're just giving away stuff here, but, you know, he's not buried alongside his family. He's always apart from and outside of these kind of terrestrial concerns and living in a world and according to a set of circumstances that are divine, that are determined by a fate, that are beyond sort of comprehension.
He's always looking out across the sea of fog.
Yes, and even described explicitly in some cases of like stepping beyond and into the gates of hell, you know, beyond the veil and seeing the world of things beyond things. And he's described at one point as he's compared to Cain. And there's this idea that after his brother dies, that's somehow his fault, that he's somehow responsible for the death of Samuel. And this curse is placed over him that follows him around for the rest of his life. I don't read it in quite that way. I don't think Harrison's the kind of writer where statements like that and references like that are meant to be taken literally. But there is a sense that his fate is like sort of predetermined, and it's a tragic kind of fate, but it's also provides him with the fullness of life and these limit experiences that are unavailable to other sort of mortal people. And it's one stab, I think, who can kind of see this and understand this. And so has a perspective to offer Tristan that he can't get elsewhere. He can't get from his father. He can't get this from his brothers, who he feels a distance from. He can't get this from the women in his life, who he's sort of distanced from in various ways.
Well, he gets it from one. He does get it from his wife, Isabel.
Yeah.
You know, and we'll get to that a little later in the novella, because he's not betrothed to Isabel right away. He has a wife, or a fiance, who he later marries, named Susanna. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so Tristan, he goes off hunting. He scalps a bunch of German soldiers and brings the scalps back. Right. This is automatically seen as like he's gone insane, and he's sent to the hospital. And it's weird that this psychologist. It's weird that Harrison notes that the psychiatrist that he sees is a Jungian, mm-hmm. as opposed to, like, I guess, a Freudian at the time.
Yeah.
But it's, and you know, I mean, this is a book dealing with archetypes, so I guess it, you know, maybe this is Harrison kind of nodding to Jungian archetypes and you know, depth psychology a little bit here. I thought that was a neat little reference that he makes, that he definitely didn't have to, but I think it does add, even the psychologist has some depth to him because of that.
Yeah, I also want to point out here too, sorry for interrupting, but this episode where Tristan and his sort of comrade Noel cut the heart of his brother out of his ribcage, you know, like in the pouring rain, they go into this field of dead soldiers and come across his brother's body, which has been cut to ribbons by machine gun fire, and his face is like in these contortions from the pain of sort of suffering through this mustard gas attack. And the lurid detail with which, you know, Harrison describes him carving out his brother's heart is like, it's just so incredible. It's so vivid. There's only, the only other writer I can think of who comes close to this kind of evocative detail that nonetheless passes the test of verisimilitude. So you don't get the sense that he's just trying to shock you with these like crazy details. Like, what if this happened, you know? Mm. But it like feels absolutely real. And maybe like Cormac McCarthy can do this and does at times, but it's again, this sort of remarkable storytelling, this remarkable writing, to be able to pull something like that off, to have in your mind, okay, I'm going to have this character go cut the heart out of his brother and melt down this wax and preserve the heart in wax and then put it in a box and then send it back to Montana. I mean, it's like crazy, but he pulls it off and it doesn't feel like sort of cringe or inauthentic. It feels totally real.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think McCarthy is a good pull there. I was thinking Homeric, but I think McCarthy, it's, especially you read something like Blood Meridian, and actually dealing with very similar themes, which is, if you're going to write the American novel, or something American, you have to include Indians.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I did the Last Things Film Festival.
Oh yeah.
So our buddy Last Things, he, talked to, however many frogs about their favorite films. I picked The Searchers.
Oh, nice.
Right.
Yep.
And Tristan just that archetypal, too civilized for savagery, but too savage for the civilized world. Like he just lives on that edge. And I think that is the American character.
Yeah, this is a huge theme in all of Harrison's work. And I mentioned previously his novel Dalva, and the sequel to that, which is also just a remarkable novel called The Road Home. These themes around Indians and these characters occupy a huge place in his writing. And he's very sympathetic, to the Indians and their what he would probably characterize as mistreatment, but really just sort of the historical sort of tragedy of their fate and what it means to be an Indian in the West, to be like a Sioux who's fighting against, Custer and Custer, I think, is actually even mentioned in the novella.
He is, yeah. And Ludlow hates Custer.
Yeah.
And I think he like served under Custer and left the army before Little Bighorn. And Ludlow even talks about how he gets a little perverse Schadenfreude there.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is pretty ballsy from Harrison, honestly, too, because he wrote this in the 70s.
Yeah, so it's late 70s. Yeah,
it's not like today where like you have H-1Bs Sherman posting.
Yeah.
This is. I'll give Harrison his props there, even though I don't necessarily agree. It takes balls to do that.
Yeah, it does, and I don't know. You could probably make some assumptions about Harrison's politics or whatever, but I think it's mostly irrelevant. What he's saying feels honest, and he doesn't then though try to disguise the Indian character and how that's distinct from Ludlow and even Tristan in this case. Anyway, I feel like this novel just and Harrison's work generally definitely incorporates the mythos of the Indians and the conflict that arises out of the modern world and the white world coming into contact with the Indian world and what that means for these Indians without sugarcoating it, without pretending as if these are just like peaceful, like they were living in this sort of peaceful Eden that was without its own sort of horrific carnage and violence. I mean, in the case of One Stab, for example, we learn that he won't let anybody into his little like sort of hut that he has on the property because in the hut, he has this bag of scalps that he's collected over the years.
A bunch of them are whites too.
Yeah. So it's not like we're pretending. It's not like Harrison's pretending as if these are just like these peaceful, innocent, sort of Edenic peoples who have kind of been cursed by sort of white incursion into their utopia. So anyway.
Yeah, he's not. What's the Lone Ranger's buddy's name?
Tonto? No, wait.
Tonto. Yeah, Tonto. He's not Tonto.
Right.
He's not what modernity has turned Indians into, where they're just this perpetual victim of stolen land and smallpox blankets and just this intentional horrible genocide.
Right.
Like One Stab definitely got his licks into, and and I shout out to Last Things for letting me kind of go off on that point in our talk. You should definitely go watch The Searchers if you haven't.
Yeah.
But so after Samuel is after his heart is encased, you see Alfred, who's the worst thing about Alfred is that he's so real. Like he's such a bastard.
Mm-hmm.
But he means he's not mustache twirling villain. He's just like out for himself. He's a striver, and that's what's infuriating.
Yes, and also a bit sort of naive. He doesn't have a proper amount of sort of cynicism towards the world. And I think of Alfred as like kind of this sort of bow tie wearing boomer con older brother
Yep.
Who, like you said, like his heart is in the right place for the most part, but is seeing the world only through this narrow lens of personal advancement, and through the kind of banal daily politics that he sort of surrounded himself by.
You can't even call him. Yeah. You know? Oh, yeah. Bureaucrat is the perfect word, because I was thinking of like, he's not really a hicklib, but he would definitely take that position if it was advantageous for him. But yeah, no, he's a bureaucrat. He's kind of a yes man. And you know, he visits Tristan while they're on the front, and Tristan just like Tristan almost can't look at him.
Right.
You know, like he almost where you have this sort of mourning, like this sort of, like, and I'm gonna say Homeric again, because you've got Tristan who's mourning over his brother, and Alfred, you know, he's sad, but he's not set against himself. He's just kind of trying to do the stiff upper lip thing. It's very, he was born to be an officer,
yes,
kind of thing, and he was born to be set apart from the rest of the family.
When we see he eventually becomes a senator, you know, and that was like always the direction he was headed. And again, there's this great detail where you kind of learn everything you need to know about him when the father, Ludlow, learns that his youngest son has died, and that Tristan, the kind of wild, chaotic, but interesting and sort of more compelling son, is off on some other adventure, and that it's his oldest son, Alfred, who's coming home. And he regrets the fact that his oldest son is coming home.
Like he dare not say it out loud, but he has this twinge of, oh, it had to be Alfred.
Yes, you know? And it's this great moment, and it's it cuts so hard because, you know, I'm a father, you know, and I have several kids, and you never can do this. You can never tell yourself, oh, I would prefer this kid to this kid or something. But maybe somewhere inside you, especially in this moment of like extremis where you're mourning after your son, and maybe there is this one kid you actually don't want to see, and it's almost funny, this moment, but it's so real, you know. It feels so true.
You know, and Ludlow, he just dashes it away right away, but he knows that he's had the thought.
Yeah,
you know, and he punishes himself for having it. Right. But at the same time, he like acknowledges that, yes, this is how I feel. It's so well done.
Yeah.
But
again, in like 2 sentences, this thing happens. Oh, it's totally incredible.
Yeah. If you were skimming, you'd miss so much.
Yeah.
You know, you'd miss the entire book almost if you were just trying to skim it to get through it, which, you know, for whatever reason people do that.
I also want to say, sorry, just while we're on this point in the novel, when again, it's this remarkable thing where the novel's building up an incredible amount of pathos around the death of Samuel, and the various characters learning about this in these different moments. And so, like, the wife learns about it, and then, you know, Tristan learns, or not the wife, but the mother learns about it, Tristan learns about it, okay, the brothers, etc. And they all go through this tremendous amount of grief, and you're waiting around as a reader for the moment at which Ludlow himself learns about his son's death. And you see what happens is the letter is in one of the characters' hands. I can't remember who's holding it.
I think it's Pet.
Yeah, so Pet, who's kind of a side character, but nonetheless significant, she's bringing the letter to Ludlow, and there's a paragraph break. And I'm paraphrasing here, but the next paragraph is something like, you know, Ludlow aged or became like an old man over the course of the next like 10 years. And you don't actually ever see his reaction. But we like skip through this incredible amount of time. And it's like, I don't even know how to describe this moment. It's such an insane kind of narrative move there to sort of pull the rug out from under your reader like that. They never get to experience that moment of direct mourning. And what it almost, the experience of it almost matches what like Ludlow's experience of it is. It pulls him out of time. Like he goes into this sort of like fugue state, and then only awakes some time later. And
I think he even has a stroke.
Yeah, he does have a stroke, and we don't. But it's not like it's directly like where he receives the letter and then.
Right. It's not that melodramatic. But
so here's I found it. Let me just read the sentence because it's just kind of remarkable. Pet came in the door, stomping the snow from her boots. She handed Ludlow the letter from Tristan and looked away. So did Decker. Only one stab watched Ludlow open the letter, not fearing the worst possible or probable, because he owned the Cheyenne sense of fatality, that what had happened had already happened. You couldn't change it, and trying to was like throwing stones at the moon. Then paragraph break. Still very much in his late prime, Ludlow grew old overnight. And then we never see any actual reaction to the letter.
What I love about that is he's built this up so much that Harrison almost knows that he can't like anything that he writes about it is just going to come off as like kind of fake and melodramatic and kind of gay. So he just skips all that and he lets the reader. The thing that he does in this that a lot of people don't is he trusts the reader.
Yes.
And he trusts them to not only understand what he's putting across, but also to fill in the gaps that he leaves for them to have their own experience with the novel.